Looking back, I do think that it's made a very positive impact on my career in terms of the range of experience, the number of facilities that I've seen, number of inspections that I've performed, how different they have been.
Welcome to the Food Grads Podcast, the podcast that takes you on a fascinating journey into the hearts and minds of the amazing people who work in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. My name is Veronica, and I am a PhD candidate studying fat-based food emulsions. On this podcast, we share insights from professionals at all stages of their careers, find out what they do, why they do it, and how they are changing the food world one day at a time. So no matter what your passion is, there's always something for everyone in food, and we'll help you find it. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Food Grads Podcast. On today's episode, we are talking about the ins and outs of food inspections, the art of communication in the workplace, and balancing work with a master's program. Our guest today is Mariia Melnychuk, Food Processing Specialist Inspector at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and a master's student at the University of Guelph for Food Safety and Quality Assurance. The CFIA is a key science-based federal regulator of food, animals, and plants. The CFIA is committed to enhancing the safety of food produced and sold in or imported into Canada, contributing to the health of animals and protecting the plant resource base. Mariia graduated from Niagara College with an advanced diploma and associate's degree in food science and technology, and since then has held multiple food safety positions. Her current master's research is looking at consumer perceptions of cultured meats. Hi, Mariia. How are you doing today?
Hi, Veronica. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited because this has been a long time coming. For those who might not know, we wanted to connect. I think it was a few years ago at this point, and we never quite made it. So we're finally here with this conversation, and I think it's a good thing because of that. Because you've done so much cool things since the last time we tried to get this interview. So I think this conversation is going to be a really good one.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that.
Let's just jump right into things. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit more about what you're doing?
My name is Mariia Melnychuk. I am a master's student in a food safety and quality assurance program at the University of Guelph. And I'm also working as a food processing specialist inspector at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Wow, that is so cool. I know that with this episode, I wanted to dive into both things because there's so many cool things that you're doing on both aspects. So I think let's start off with the CFIA side. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about what the CFIA is and what that entails for your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Canadian Food Inspection Agency is a federal science-based agency that regulates food, animals, and plants. I am working as a food processing specialist inspector in the agri-food group, and currently I am looking after dairy and processed fruit and vegetable commodities. As an inspector, I perform different inspections to verify that companies are meeting regulatory requirements and that are producing or importing safe foods into Canada.
Wow, that is a very important role. How did that actually come to be, like doing that role? How did you end up even finding out about it?
Well, previously I was working in the private industry in a few quality assurance roles, but I always wanted to get more regulatory experience in the public sector. So I was closely monitoring the GC Jobs website, and I applied for the meat inspector position when one became available.
Okay, simple as that. Well, I'm a little surprised to hear that you're doing both dairy and fruits and vegetables because in my eyes, those are really different industries. Well, dairy is much more, well, not that it's more regulated, but it's different than something like fruit and vegetables. So would you be able to talk about the differences maybe between the regulations, or how do I want to word this? I guess I want to get a general understanding of like what are the things that are looked for in the dairy side as opposed to the fruits and vegetables side.
Well, as an inspector in agri-food group, we look after a wide range of commodities, right? For example, honey, eggs, dairy, as I mentioned, processed
Hmm.
fruit and vegetable, fresh fruit and vegetable, also fish. So the idea is to rotate and get various experience and be comfortable working with different food commodities. Essentially, in terms of inspections, we're looking for the similar things. We're looking that the companies are producing safe foods at all times and that they're meeting regulatory requirements. My job responsibilities could include collecting food samples, performing permission or label reviews, preventive control inspections, or, for example, pre-license and license amendment verification inspections. And that would be the same for both dairy and processed fruit and vegetable sectors.
Okay, that would make sense that there would be some similarities between it. So I'm guessing that you're someone who really likes the details if you're into this type of
Yeah,
role.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So I guess does that type of job bring you around to different areas? Like, are you traveling to lots of different parts of like Ontario, or is it kind of local for you?
I am actually currently in Alberta. I used to work in Ontario, but I'm in Alberta right now. And I've been lucky to mostly travel across the Calgary area.
Hmm.
So I haven't had to go very far, which again, I'm, thankful for.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm also realizing that didn't realize what area you worked
Oh,
you
that's
were in
okay.
right now
That's
because
fine.
I saw one thing on your profile and I saw there and I was like, I'm a little confused. But I guess that does go to show that this industry, just when people talk in general, it is a type of job or industry that you can start in like the Ontario region and you can go across Canada. Like there's always little pockets for someone to find jobs within the food industry.
Yeah, and you are correct in terms of I used to be in Ontario. I just move around, right? Absolutely. So I first started in Ontario as a meat inspector, and then I applied through a job competition process for a role that was based out of southern Alberta, which was the food processing specialist inspector position. And that's kind of how I ended up in Calgary.
How has Calgary been for you? How has it been treating you? Wait, has the winter weather started for you yet?
You know what? We got our first probably 10, 15 centimeters of snow like a month ago. It would have been middle of October.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, but so far so good. I really like that we have mountains like 1 hour drive from here. And yeah, I think there are some things you can do in the city. So yeah, so far I don't have many complaints other than harsh winters.
I know we haven't been getting snow here lately, or we haven't gotten our big snowfall, which I'm like, it's a little late, but I've always wanted to travel to Calgary. I think I'll maybe have to stop by, say hi to
Oh,
you
absolutely.
when I do that. Coming back to the food processing industry and such, I wanted to know what are some of the key skills or qualities that have been essential to your job for doing this inspector role?
That's a good question. I think it's extremely important for an inspector to have effective oral and written communications. It's important for both dealing with companies and your colleagues. As an inspector, you need to be firm in your communications, right? Adaptability is also an important skill. As I mentioned, some people start in a meat industry and then they kind of transition into more of agri-food commodities. And each commodity has its own differences, and you need to be able to adapt to changing work environment and be constantly willing to learn. As an inspector in my current position, I definitely
Hmm.
find the skill of organizing and planning my day ahead of time very important. Sometimes we get busy and you want to be able to plan ahead of time, and it definitely helps.
Absolutely. So building on that, one of the things that you mentioned is that planning and organizing. I know with when I worked in QA for a bit, like I found that the daytime I'd have my day planned and it'd be kind of thrown out the window maybe at like 10 o'clock because there was already something going on in production or something. As an inspector, do you find that shift happens as much, or is it a little bit more regulated your day?
Well, I think definitely sometimes things come up that we don't see coming. But, generally you try to schedule your inspections on a certain date, certain time. And I mean, emergency can happen on both sides, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes, you get client inquiries that, you don't quite foresee it, and, you need to plan around that. But generally, I think if you are good with organizing and planning, most of the time, at least you can expect your days to go a certain way.
Okay. Okay. And then as well, one of the first things you said was communication. That communication and being able to articulate things to others is such an important part of your role. Did you find that for you that you came into this role with a strong sense of communication, or did you find that you kind of had to learn a little bit more as you were going along?
Um, well, I think I had, a general skill of communication, right? But
Hmm.
sometimes some things I kind of just had to learn along the way, like for example, writing inspection reports, right? That is something specific to the position. So I
Hmm.
wouldn't have had so much experience with that
That's true.
prior to joining CFIA.
Mhm. It's funny. It's It's interesting how you say writing, and I don't know why I'm thinking that. I just feel that we talk about so much about oral communication and those types of things in these types of roles, but when it comes to food safety and that, there's actually a lot of writing involved. There's a lot of typing. There's a lot of being very clear in what you're finding so that it's in that written work. So it's interesting to see how being able to write is, even though people get really frustrated in doing it in school, it is actually a pretty important skill to be able to do in the workplace.
I think both oral and written communications are equally important, to be honest.
Hmm.
When you're communicating with your colleagues, right, or companies, you're mostly communicating via the email, right? And you need to pay attention to how you come across, right?
That's true. It's crazy how important email is, and it's a skill that you don't realize how much it's used until you get into the workplace. And I know that during school, I might maybe wrote write see, oh my gosh, I might write to my professors by email and such, but it was never really like that necessary. If I really needed something, I would go to office hours. And then when I started working in the workplace, I realized how important it was to be able to write emails without making the email super long that they're going to miss very important information, but then you also have to be polite. And it's just like this balancing act. And it's like, I remember when I first got started working about it was how stressed I was about writing emails because I was like, I have to match the tone. And it's just a whole interesting thing that you don't really think about when you're in school.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, I think my partner's gonna kill me when I say this when comes home and he's like, "Oh, I hate writing emails and all that. I don't understand how like I spend way too much time doing it because I have to figure out how to do this and figure out how to do that." And it's a skill, and I remind him that I'm just like it's practice. Even though as much as you hate it, like you will get better with it. So it's just like with any skill, it takes time and deliberate practice.
Yeah, and I think it's just so easy to be misunderstood, right? If
Hmm.
you don't develop the skill in a proper way, or it's so easy to just kind of want to type like 4 paragraphs when really it should just be 1 paragraph, and like nobody wants to read all of that, right?
I know, and you think you're doing yourself a you think you're doing at the beginning, I was thinking I was doing them a favor because I was like, if I write out a really long paragraph and all that, I can't miss any information because it's all there. And then once I was on the receiving end of it, I figured out, Oh, this is not what I wanna see. This is a lot. Like, I have to mentally prepare myself for this email to read it.
Yep. Yep. That can happen too.
Well, coming back to you, one of the things that I would love to ask individuals is that you've worked in many different places and maybe either through school or maybe through your personal life. Has there been any instances that you can remember that have really made an impact on your career? Something that stands out and it's just maybe a lesson or just an interaction that you had with an individual that stuck with you?
Hmm. Well, one story that really comes to mind right now is how I was first working in Ontario in a meat inspector role, but I really wanted to get experience outside of the slaughterhouse environment. So I decided at the moment that I was willing to relocate across the country if needed to get more experience as a food processing specialist inspector, right? Working with different commodities. So I started applying for different positions across the country. And I do believe that it would have taken me longer if I was only looking to get a position in Ontario. And, looking back, I do think that it's made a very positive impact on my career, just in terms of the range of experience, right? The number of facilities that I've seen, number of inspections that I've performed, how different they have been as
Mhm.
well.
Absolutely. Well, good for you. I think that's something that I've heard. I'll be honest, it'd be really hard for me. I have a very rooted life here, but for those individuals who are able to just take that plunge and go around, I definitely agree with it because you have new opportunities, you might not know about the living conditions, the feelings of the area, and of course, like you said, I mean, the reality of it is, although there's more processors than that in Ontario, there's just so many more opportunities across the country and very more specialized, if you go to the East or to the West Coast, you might have more opportunity to work in, like, the fishing industry, or there's just different regions, so I really applaud you for being able to do that.
Ah, thank you. Well, it was challenging at first. So,
I I can imagine, and did you like, one thing I did wanna touch upon or just ask that I was curious is how you got into the meat area? Because I feel that's maybe not the area a lot of people would think to you've done a lot of so far in your career, whether working through, I think through your co-op positions, through your full-time positions, like, you've worked in a lot of kinda meat-related fields, like, how did that end up happening?
well, to be honest, it wasn't something that I was specifically looking into getting, especially working in a slaughterhouse environment.
Mhm.
But, an opportunity came for me, right, to start in the CFIA as a meat inspector. And I was working in a federally licensed poultry slaughterhouses. And two of my main priorities were to verify that food animals were handled and transported in a humane way, as well as to ensure the food safety of finished meat products. And it's not for everybody, but you walk away with the satisfaction of knowing that the meat products are safe for Canadians and also that animals are treated and transported in a humane way.
Right. I mean, it's an important role and it's good to know that there are, from the government level as well, that these are being checked for, that it's not just on companies to do, of course, they should be, but having that secondary regulation source that is confirming that these things are happening because it is um if we are going to consume meat, I mean, it should be done in that type of way. So switching topics though, I had to also one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about on the show, which we're talking about meat, but it's going to switch over to a totally different aspect of it, is despite everything that you're doing, you're also somehow doing a master's program. And I want to dive a little bit more into that and figuring that all out. So, would you be able to speak to your program that you're doing right now for your master's and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I am a student in a Master's of Science program in Food Safety and Quality Assurance at the University of Guelph. It's a course-based master's program but it also requires the completion of a major research project. And my current research project involves assessing perceptions of Canadian consumers toward cell-based meat.
That is very cool. See, now I put the pieces together because as someone who's doing my PhD research who had transferred from master's, I did a fully research-based project. So I wasn't quite 100% sure if you were doing the course-based or if it was a combination. So that does clarify it. So going into that, let's first quickly talk about the course-based portion of it. So are these a nice complement, I assume, to what you're doing? Like, what kind of courses would you be doing with the University of Guelph?
Well, I already completed all my courses. It actually worked out very well for me because I took all my courses and then I was able to focus on my research project. I would admit though that the selection of the courses was pretty good, especially for distance education students. You had choice in terms of what you were mostly interested in. Just a few examples of the courses, I've taken would be leadership in food safety, principles of food safety and quality assurance, as well as operations management course. I really enjoyed that one. But again, you do have quite a bit of choice. I also really enjoyed the food law and policy course that I took in my first semester, and I really liked it because it wasn't just about a Canadian food law and policy, but it was more about the international aspect of it as well, which I don't get to work with as much in my current job. So that was definitely very, very interesting.
See, I'm telling you, you're a very detail-oriented person because most people do not want to be doing food law.
Oh my God, I loved it.
So were they just teaching you like I don't know, like is it I guess it would be like what the regulations are for other countries and such. Would that be or like how exports and imports work with the country?
Well, as a graduate level courses, several times we had to like analyze literature and
Mhm.
come up with our own paper. Sometimes we had in that course, right, we had some questions that were specifically asking for details, and you had to like go through, for example, American legislation, right? And then you had to come up with the answers. Um, yeah, you know what? It was a little bit over a year ago, so I wouldn't remember like the specific assignments that I had to do, but I remember that it was very interesting and it was challenging at the same time.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, and you had those discussions across your classmates, I guess, and you would get a topic of discussion and you had to read, literature, read legislation, and then, express your opinion on a certain topic, right? And then your classmates would have a different opinion.
That's really cool. I love that I'm always a good person for loving to dive into the literature and like reading what the sources are saying on it. And just to confirm, was this online or was it in person?
Um, so, there are different options that students can choose. I was just doing a distant delivery option. So for me, the courses were online.
Perfect.
And what I liked a lot is that, I knew ahead of time which courses were available in a distant delivery
Mhm.
mode. So, there wasn't really any surprises in that regard. And, you have a deadline for your assignment or for the project, and, you can do it, you can work on it anytime during the day or night or, you know, whenever it works for you, right? So,
That's perfect for someone who's working at CFIA at the same time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm really grateful for this option that University of Guelph gives, right, to people that want to keep working.
Mhm. Absolutely, and now I wanna dive into it more. You talked about cell-based meats in terms of the perceptions of cell-based meats on your, as your research topic, and I know that you were sending that survey out to everyone that you could. It was everywhere. I was seeing it in my email. I was seeing it on my LinkedIn, seeing it in my groups. It made its rounds. I hope you got a lot of respondents.
Well, I hope you completed it.
I did. Yes.
Well, thank you for that.
So tell me, I mean, as someone who is talking about the topic, a lot of our listeners might not be really familiar with cell-based meats. Would you be able to generally speak to what they are so someone could have a better understanding of that?
Yeah, cell-based meats are a type of food product that is created by cultivating animal cells in a controlled laboratory environment, which happens outside of an animal's body. Then the cells are nurtured and multiplied until they form edible tissues, which can then be harvested and processed into various meat products. And the aim of cell-based meats is to provide a more sustainable and ethical alternative to traditional animal agriculture.
Wow. And how did you stumble into this research for your project?
To be honest with you, I was first determined to work on a different topic for my research project. But after writing a research proposal, I realized that my initial topic selection probably wasn't the best. Yeah. And then I'm actually so happy that I spoke with professors Anne Wilcock and Jeffrey Farber, who have brought this topic of cell-based meat into my attention. They're now my research advisors, and they have both been very supportive and so great to work with. Anyways, after I spoke with them, I started reading about the topic more, and I realized that I was interested in exploring it more.
Mhm.
And then I specifically decided to do a consumer survey because I thought it would be an amazing learning opportunity because I've never done one before, right? And
Mhm.
I was 100% correct on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Running surveys is, I did a little bit of a taste of it when I was doing my marketing course, and it's just a whole different way of thinking. And it's also really a struggle trying to get people to do surveys.
Oh my God. Well, I'm so happy that you completed mine.
Yeah, well, when it came up before it even, you came up in my email first because I was with the WIFM group, so that's how I saw that. But where would you say we are currently in terms of cell-based meats in to how close we are to consumers being able to accessibly get it, at least in Canada? Would you say that we're close, or is there a lot of hoops that from the not from the perception side, but more so from the start? I don't know, how do I want to word this? Like how close could it be for me to even want to try it, irregardless of my perceptions of it?
Well, cell-based meat is not currently approved in Canada. I do think that there is some work going on in terms of deciding on the regulations that may be needed to be put into place prior to. But I am not 100% sure of the timeline of when it might become available to the public, but hopefully in the next 5 years. But that would just be my estimate, right? I don't
Mhm.
exactly know.
Yeah, there's so much to it. I mean, it's a whole new idea. Like it's a whole new thing that to me, like when I was younger, I never even heard of it. Like it sounded like a sci-fi thing. So the fact that it's even being spoken about on a level that it could possibly to be done sounds super futuristic to me. But in terms of growing, like for the cell-based meats, are they grown to be in like an animal's like the shape of their thigh, or like what is currently the thought process of cell-based meats in terms of how would a consumer receive it?
The recent literature that I read explained it more in the form of ground meat. It's grown
Right.
and then harvested in the form of ground meat, and then it's further processed into various products, which could be burgers, sausages, nuggets, whatever the case may be, right? But
Hmm.
it starts from ground meat, right?
Okay.
But I'm sure that uh, can change very quickly, right, with more advanced technologies being implemented.
Absolutely. Well, that makes sense because I know that, of course, there's going to be some startup out there that's already trying to make like a cell-based steak. I think that recently they made a cell-based was it it was obviously it wasn't a dinosaur. It was something related to that timeline, and they made meatballs of it. What did they do? Oh, it's slipping my mind. I think it was mammoth. Maybe it was mammoth meat. I don't know. It was just like just to show that they're able to do it. Like just it was a proof of concept, and it's kind of crazy that we're getting to that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of companies across the world I know are working on developing, their products, cell-based meat products. Yeah, but in Canada, it's not approved yet. Hopefully soon that will change.
I'm always interested in terms of student supervisor relationships because it's such a core part of the research journey, and having a good supervisor that has an idea of what they would like or how you bring it in. A lot of people don't when they come into master's program, that can be a lot of confusion for them. I know when I entered into my master's program, I didn't really know what I was going to do to be like I knew I wanted to work with my supervisor. I really enjoyed his field of research, but coming into my master's program, I didn't personally have a key idea of what I was going to do. And for me personally, he was said, this is the topic that I would like you to do. I think these would be good projects for you to do. So I kind of just rolled with it. And as I became a PhD, though, I did start to develop my own experiments, my own thought processes. But when I was in my master's stage, it was very much, this is what I have funding for. This is the project. Can you please do it? So I think that's where I was more so going with this question. I know that was a big issue for me when I was transitioning from going back to school. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been pretty fortunate in that, in that regard. I did feel like I did feel like I had a choice,
Mm-hmm.
but I was specifically seeking advice, right? And I was seeking more guidance because, I came to the conclusion that the topic I selected at first wasn't good enough. It wasn't narrow enough. It wasn't specific enough. And after I came to that conclusion, I was for guidance, and I'm happy that I got that guidance. And I probably couldn't have had a better experience, right, with that topic selection.
That's good. I'm so happy to hear that it did work out for you despite some challenges with the original topic because again, coming from that research perspective and not knowing what you're getting into, I know a lot of people when they do their PhD or do their master's, they do have to write proposals, but in many cases the supervisor already has a pretty clear idea of what they would like. And then you get other individuals where it's kind of thrown to the wolves and you have to really come up with your own topic in order to like get that funding, get the NSERC funding, like all these types of things. So it can be a challenge for some individuals not knowing what to expect.
Yeah. Well, I think throughout this project, I am now hopefully in the final stages of completing it. I'm aiming for December. I generally had a very clear idea of what was expected of me, at the different stages in my project, which again, I'm just so happy. I'm very happy about that, right? Because as you mentioned, students find it confusing sometimes, not knowing what's expected of them or what topic to pick. And I definitely experienced some of that scare, with my topic selection after I prepared my proposal, because I just, I realized it's not something that I could work on for like a year and then have something substantial, something of a great value at the end of it. I'm really happy that I switched the topic and now we're talking about cell-based meats, right?
Right. And I mean, I guess you can't probably talk about the punchline, but have you been finding that the results were surprising to you based on, I know we're not supposed to, but usually we have some kind of idea of with our hypothesis about some direction it's going to be. Do you think that you have been surprised with the results based on what you started with your ideas?
Hmm, I wouldn't say I'm, surprised. I would definitely say, I had a few open-ended questions in my survey.
Mhm.
Um, and I would definitely say that some people feel strongly about cell-based meat, and they're not afraid to express their opinion.
That's surveys
to
for you.
to me, it was, I've had some fun reading those. It wasn't so fun analyzing that part, but
Right, because with the open-ended survey portions, that can be really tedious, right? To like actually get some it's really useful because you get the verbal communications about it, but it's so much easier having like 1 out of 5. 5 is 5. Add this, add the average, do a standard deviation. And but when you get with the open-ended surveys, it's like, how do you actually take that and convert it into useful information?
yeah, that was definitely a challenging part for some of the questions, and I didn't make them open-ended from the get-go, but I had like an other option, and then
Mhm.
people could specify the other part, which I guess you could count as open-ended. But it just came down to me reading through all of that and trying to put it into one category or create a different category. And then, yeah, the data analysis part of those questions was definitely challenging. And, it still is, right? I'm still working on a data analysis part.
Did you have
hmm
to learn stats in order to do this?
So I do have some statistical support. University of Guelph provides statistical support to students like myself. And also my research advisor, Dr. Anne Wilcox, has been extremely helpful with her consumer research background. But yes, there is a statistical analysis part involved, which, to be honest with you, was and continues to be quite
Mhm.
difficult for
It
me.
is difficult. I find it difficult too. I still have to review. I've used certain statistic things multiple times and I still have to go back and remind myself what an ad hoc test is, what the P
Ah,
represents, what does like the significance. Like I'm like I should I go back and constantly remind myself because it's not intuitive to me.
no, no, I don't think any of the statistics is intuitive, but I'm just, I guess, starting my journey, right, in terms of becoming less intimidated by it.
Well, good luck on that journey. It's a long road.
Yeah, well, as long as every time you do it, you become a little bit less intimidated than the last time, I think that's a win for me.
Yes, for sure. And actually, but it's such an important aspect to research. Like it's so easy to overlook in journals, but I feel like when you go back and you have you're less intimidated, you can go back and start to really analyze results and you realize, that report has a little bit too big of an error bar, or like, I wonder why they chose 0.9 instead of 0.95. Like it does really open up the world, even though it is a challenging topic.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that.
So, rounding out with the program, as you mentioned, hopefully you'll be done soon with all that. But I wanted to know, like, why did you end up deciding to go back for your master's degree in food safety and quality? I mean, you've had a lot of experience working in the food safety space. Like, what brought you to want to pursue further education?
So I was very keen to learn and grow my knowledge. And, I read a lot about the program that University of Guelph was offering and, their course selection. And I knew that I would enjoy it a lot. I knew it was going to be challenging to work and study at the same time, but it is so worth it. I'm very, very happy that the University of Guelph is offering the option of completing it remotely, which is so great for people like myself that are working. You're kind of getting a different experience when you work in the industry, when you go back to school. And I think it's the combination of both, right, that makes you the most knowledgeable professional that you could be.
Wow. That's so good. I'm just like, how does she do it? Like, how do you actually manage to work full time and have that brain power to do all that you're doing with this master's program? Like, I'm assuming it comes back to that organization and planning.
Yeah, and I'm actually very happy that it worked out for me in a way that I did my courses first, and then I had a chance to focus on the research project. But the first probably 2 semesters, when I was doing maybe 3, 4 full-time courses at the same time and working full-time, it was definitely very challenging. And a lot of times that's all I was doing. I was either working or studying, and
Hmm.
like there was nothing in between, really.
Wow.
Right?
Good for you. Wow, that's impressive. And I think that lends to a good place to ask your advice. I always like to ask those who come on the show, whether it could be those looking to go into food safety or maybe just general advice. Do you have any advice you'd like to give students that are listening?
You know what? I'd like to add to the previous question that, it doesn't have to be that way. I know some people are taking like one course at a time, one course per semester, and they do have a little bit more work-life balance, I guess it's called.
Hmm.
In terms of, advice to the students, I would say don't be afraid to take opportunities that are challenging. It could be a course, it could be a job opportunity, it could be a different position that takes you across the country, whatever it may be. Don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. It's being uncomfortable that makes you grow the most, and not just makes you a better professional, but makes you a different kind of person in the end. I would say also take advantage of the networking opportunities. Some people feel intimidated by networking, but it's just something that you have to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's something that may help you get ahead in your career and have that network of colleagues that you can talk to.
I think that's really good advice. Actually, the timing's perfect because it just resonates with me. When I was watching a video, I was like, how do I become an expert in my field? And they pretty much summed it up to you have to get uncomfortable and you have to put yourself in situations that you have to stretch yourself to grow, because unless you put yourself out there, you're just always going to be doing the same thing over and over. And just because you do the same thing over and over, it doesn't make you get any better. You got to really stretch yourself. And clearly, that's a lot of what you've been doing.
Well, I'm trying. I still have a lot to learn and a lot of things to do, but definitely taking opportunities as they come and not being afraid of a challenge. I think that's something that students should be willing to do from time to time.
Well, I think I'm going to leave it there because I think that's really good advice. Thank you so much, Mariia, for taking time to come on the show. I'm happy that we were finally able to sit down and got to really dive deep into what you do at the CFIA and then as well with what you're doing at your university. Like I said, very impressed with the fact that you're able to do both at the same time. I know that you did the courses first, but still very impressive. And before I let you go, I just need to ask, where can people find you?
The best way to find me would be on LinkedIn. I do spend probably I probably spend more time than I should on that platform.
I feel you. I'm like you. Yes, yes.
Yeah, that would probably be the best way.
Wonderful. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing what you do. It was a really good conversation.
Thank you for having me, Veronica. It was nice talking to you. And if you come to Calgary, if you end up coming to Calgary, do give me a call, I guess.
Thank you everyone so much for listening to episode 82 of the Food Grads podcast. All the notes to this podcast can be found by clicking on the Food Grads website and clicking on the Student and Grads tab. There you can find any notes to past or future episodes. If you enjoyed the show, then please rate us 5 stars on anywhere you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We are also on YouTube, so if you prefer listening to the podcast that way, check it out. One thing that's really cool about pursuing a career in food safety is that there's just so many different places that you can go. You can take the government route like Mariia, working for the CFIA as an inspector, Or you could go for the certification body route, acting as a trainer or auditor at a food certification body like SKF or HACCP or NSF. Or you could go that corporate route, which is working directly for the company that has a food safety department. All viable options, and there's pros and cons to each of them, though two things that stood out to Mariia, for me at least, when we were having this conversation and editing back this podcast, is the first is that she's worked in so many different areas within the meat industry space in terms of food safety. I think we've even covered it in this podcast, but I've heard from a lot of sources that working in the meat industry, especially in a bigger organizations, have a lot of in-house training. So maybe if you're looking for a position right out of school, it could be a good place to start because you have the opportunity to see like a multi-level organization if you're working for one of those bigger companies, and you can have access to a lot of training. After all, the meat industry is highly regulated, so there's a lot of precautions in place to teach everyone. The second is that she kind of alluded to the idea that fortune favors the bold, and if you're struggling to find a place to work, it might be a good idea to look outwards and look across the country. Canada is home to a huge food industry, as you would see from this podcast, from cities to rural areas. Like if you go anywhere, they have a food industry place somewhere. So there's a lot of potential to look around and find a place that really works for you. So look at Mariia. She was able to get a job that she loves and still pursue a post-secondary degree, which, again, super impressive. And she was able to branch out. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there, but also go in with a plan. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next time.